Welcome to Parenting Teens, the podcast where we navigate the ups and downs of raising teenagers. As founders of Ramp Nutritional Products for Teens, we're real parents going through the same challenges, and we bring on experts to offer unique insights and inspiration. Join our community and know you're not alone in your struggles. All right, we are recording. Welcome everybody to the Parenting Teens podcast. I'm Annie. I'm here with Simona and our very special guest, Dr. Jillian Murphy. Before we go dive right in, I'm going to tell everyone all about the amazing Dr. Jillian Murphy. But before we do, I just want to, and even just for you, Jill, kind of share a little bit about I guess the podcast, our format, and kind of what we're trying to do on the Parenting Teens podcast. We were just chatting before we recorded that it's like kind of a shorter format. And sort of the reason why, I mean, we all know we're pretty tight for time. I think most parents are. But part of what we're trying to do is to be a resource for parents and really foster some community and provide educational resources. And so what we've done is we've kind of put it out to the broader community. We've asked people to give us their questions. And what we really are hoping to do with this podcast is in each episode, answer a question and bring someone in who has expertise in this particular area. We are grateful and blessed to have a community of experts around us. And so what we're hoping to do is to bring someone in to help us tackle these questions. We're sure that the conversation will stray beyond the question, but ultimately keeping it tight, keeping it to the question and provide resources so people can really action, I guess take action is, I guess, what I was trying to say. So that's sort of the setup for what we're going to do today. But before we dive in, I'm so excited to introduce everybody to Dr. Jillian Murphy, who I can call a friend and a colleague. Jill is a naturopathic doctor who helps diverse, smart, health-conscious people who are done with dieting get out of their heads and reconnect with their bodies. Jill uses up-to-date eating psychology, clinical insight, and guidance around diet culture, health, and weight to teach individuals why they stay stuck in negative patterns with food and feel constant body dissatisfaction, and how they can make the shift to food peace and body joy. I love that word, body joy. Jill also works with parents, and this is why Jill is here today, whose children are struggling to eat properly, whether it's because they are exceptionally fussy or obsessed with food. She helps parents who are stressed out by the fact that their kids are not growing enough or are gaining weight in a concerning way with simple, practical, research-validated advice. We love all three of those things. And Jill's work is really perfect for parents who want to raise children who are a joy to feed and who grow well and have a great relationship with their bodies. So thank you so much, Jill, for joining us today. We are very, very excited and grateful to have you here.
Well, I'm so glad to be here. Podcasts are like my favorite thing to do. So thank you for inviting me.
Jill, you were born to be on podcasts.
To just talk.
So, gave a little bit more about your background. Is there anything that we left out or anything? I mean, you just said you love podcasts.
No,
can you just tell us how that fits into your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's everything. I think the main thing is like, I'm a naturopathic doctor, but started to find that there were just some holes that I was finding in the approach to food, particularly, and weight and bodies that I was finding concerning. And this was like 2011. So I would say as we record this now, we know that there's an intuitive eating and there's a body positive and body acceptance and weight neutral care movement happening that's quite large. But when I was exploring this, 10, 12 years ago, it was still incredibly fringe. Like this idea of internally led eating, that our bodies, which is so interesting because this is like the fundamental ideology of naturopathic medicine, is that the body holds all this intelligence. And yet when it comes to weight and food, we sort of override that and we're like, no, none of this can be correct, right? If we're not thin and we're not eating Instagram worthy plates of food, there must be something wrong with our intuition. It's broken. So we'll just override it and we'll, do something different. So, I just sort of sunk myself into that world. And then I did extra training in a few different areas, but 2.5 years I spent with Ellen Satter, who's written so many beautiful books on feeding children and children's weight. And that was a real gift because she's really at the end of her, I shouldn't say the end, but she's in this other phase of her career, I think, which she's going to move out of like training other people.
Mhm.
So that was really beautiful because I also got to meet so many different like practitioners that work with everything from eating disorders to incredibly challenging health concerns like anaphylactic allergies and diabetes. And they're all working from this perspective and this place with food, which just makes feeding our kids easier. And like you said in the intro, more joyful, more relaxed. It recenters the family unit as the most important part of feeding our kids. And truly the thing that really helps them grow to be incredibly healthy and confident people. Like this is what we find in the research over and over and over again, right? Like regardless of what's on the table, it's the coming together around food that's so nourishing truly for kids. So it recenters that. And then the only other thing I would add is that I also do a tiny bit of work as a naturopath with the Kyla Fox Center. So I've done, at this point, and I love that center so much. It's a virtual center, but based out of Toronto. So everything from really, really, really serious disordered eating to like food challenges. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Jill, you are a wealth of information, and and this is why we have a big juicy question for you. So, Simona, do you
Okay.
want to set
So,
that up?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just think these topics are so obviously near and dear for me and with my family. And, just being like a child of the 80s, I feel like we had
we can talk
just
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should. I think we should.
the opposite of, a lot of this information. And I think we are just very much led astray by ourselves and so many different ways. So I think, and then as we parent now, coming from that background, and now we have kids that we're trying to parent in a new way with new challenges. It's yeah. Anyways, so we'll get to the question and then we'll kind of dig through there. So our question that we got is just extremely relatable. I didn't write it, but I could have. It is, I cringe when my kids eat too much sugar and processed food. But now that they're getting a bit older, I see them getting a bit rigid with their diet. How can I help them strike a balance between eating healthy and being excessively focused on clean eating? I feel like I've created monsters.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Oh
such a big
no.
one. Yeah. That's like my job. This is what I do. So yeah, this is a really big question. And I think it's so interesting that you brought up the 80s because I feel like, I know we got to keep this thing short, but I do also think that we need to take a little bit of a look at why we're at where we're at when it
Yes.
comes to food, because I think it's really important to validate feeding is parenting, and parents are all doing exactly what they think is the best, right thing for their kids, right?
Mhm.
And so just to validate like the positive intention in here when it comes to like regulating sugar, that sounds like an incredibly reasonable thing to do, just to regulate sugar, right? So if we think back to like, cause, and I'll just go back to the 80s because that's like when I was a kid through 80s, 90s. This obviously goes back further, but I would argue that there was two things happening at that time. One, the parenting age was a real swing from today, like almost bordering on neglectful parenting. If we're in a little
Yes.
bit of a helicopter moment, there's a lot of neglect, and it was a lot of like, I remember this. I had really loving, caring parents, and it was just like, eat what you want. And like then dinner would be on the table, and we didn't think too much about it. And there wasn't too much conversation about like healthy or not healthy. And I think that we had relatively decent food, but like I'd never ate an avocado until I was like 20. We didn't regularly have strawberries in our house. We didn't have, like, it was like very basic seasonal that was easily available at the grocery store foods, a lot of meat and potatoes, that kind of thing. And definitely not a lot of conversation around sugar or even trans fats were in everything. Like, it's just like, this is just like the milieu, but it was also a very heavy dieting milieu, right? So
Mhm.
dieting was overtly socially acceptable. Everybody was doing it. They were talking about it. It was in every magazine. A lot of fat phobia, a lot of like, complete denial of body diversity, or like, it was just, there was that happening. And then as we have like evolved into this clean eating era, what we've seen is that the pendulum has swung. And so parents are highly involved in nutrition and regulating and managing the food on the table and talking about it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And dieting is no longer acceptable, but it didn't just go away. What we've seen is that it's gone from being really overt to quite covert. And so a lot of that messaging has snuck into and is like all tangled up with all of that nutrition messaging that kids are doing. And so there's a lot of morality involved in food choices. There's a lot of pressure, even the word clean, right? Clean versus dirty. Is the food actually dirty? Are there potentially families in the country that survive on that food and who are raising children who are going to develop well and grow into great people and do amazing things? Is it really dirty, or is it just a slightly less nutrient dense option? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's challenging because on the surface, it seems like, of course, it's just a reasonable thing to talk about and do, but it's all of the messaging that's within it and all of the ways that bodies and food are discussed in the greater culture, not just in our homes, that our children are absorbing. And we know that kids direct a lot of things at themselves. That's what they're doing developmentally. And so it's not just like sugar's bad. It's like, well, what if I like sugar though? Then maybe I'm bad, right? And they're not thinking consciously about this. This is just the way that they interpret. And so a lot of the work that, that I've been trained to do is just to reteach families how to educate around food by just modeling, by just eating together and modeling, a lot less talking, a lot less educating, because children are not necessarily developmentally ready for all of that nutritional information in the same way that we don't bombard them with emotional information or sexual information or, we don't bombard young children with that. We try to model consensual behavior and appropriate relationships. And so we talk about modeling with food and educating through experience and experimentation and curiosity. And the goal that we talk about, which might be really interesting to talk about here, is raising competent eaters, not necessarily healthy eaters, because health is a really challenging word. And what's healthy in an Asian household might not be what's healthy in an East Indian household or a Caucasian, Canadian, or Indigenous. There's a lot of demonizing of cultural foods. There's a lot of demonizing of just foods that are really delicious. And so what if we just took the healthy out of there and we let individuals figure that out for themselves? Not for themselves, I don't mean for themselves, but just in cooperation with bodies and over time and experience and with professionals. But competent eating is really the goal in all of this, which is how do we raise kids that can manage themselves with ease around sugar and processed food, as well as more nutrient dense food, right? What would that look like? And then we're sending them off into the world with a skill that's not going to fall apart the minute they leave home, right? Yeah. And they leave. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, you've said so many things, Jill, that I want to jump on. So I'm going to forget a whole bunch of them. But what you just said there about the competency piece, I mean, to me, thematically, that resonates. Is that not what we're trying to do in all aspects? I mean, competence, resilience. I mean, this is what we want. We don't want to, control and overmanage. I mean, that's what for me, success as a parent is competence, confidence, empowered kids. And so when you say that, it's, of course, why wouldn't it also enter their food choice realm? I mean, why would that be any different?
Yeah, if you go to a birthday party and you eat too much cake, you don't feel great. You learn from it. It's not the end of the world, right? It's also about it's zooming out a little bit. With food in particular, I find we get very zoomed in on every plate, every moment, every morsel. And we forget that our health is made up of a lifetime of meals, and yeah.
So just on that, and I can feel it in my body. And again, I think I tried to do the zoom out. So our younger son is getting braces tomorrow. So this morning, my husband says to him, let's go tonight and buy a big bag of candy. And because, after tomorrow, you're not going to supposedly have it. I'm sure he will. But, and I could feel the contraction in my body, that doesn't sound like a good idea because I'm like, why would you want to at 8:00 at night go get a big bag of candy? Like, on what planet is that a good idea? And when you just say, Jill, your life is made up of many, many, like, I'm like, and how fun is that? And that's a good core memory.
And that could be a core. I was just going to say that to me feels like a core memory.
Right.
And like, sometimes it doesn't always work, but sometimes the analogy I'll use is like, I don't know, like, what if you'd suggested that they binge watch this funny movie really late at night, or that they'd done, like, thinking about other ways that people cope or do things that are a little bit like counterintuitive to biological health that actually really feeds mental, emotional health, or really feeds social health, which we can talk about in a minute, because I think that's really important to sort of like the way forward. But like, would you have gotten that same feeling in your body? Because such a big piece of the work when it comes to kids and feeding is actually working with the adults,
of course,
who have been through
100%.
all of that diet, lived through all of those ages and eras, and struggled with their own body things, and then found clean eating, while forgetting that they had their whole childhoods to mess about and experiment and figure out what foods felt good to them.
Yeah.
But they've found it, and not only have they found it, but again, it's highly moralized. There's a lot of problems with some of the food conversations that are happening, and we've internalized that. And so it can turn into like, it's like a failure or something if your kids eat these foods or have these experiences, or, and what we know, just if it eases anyone who's listening, it's like, what we know is that children grow up to eat like their parents. If there is not too little, like, so we talk about the division of responsibility, if there's not too little interference from the parents, and if there is not too much interference with the parents. So there's like this division of responsibility where like the parents' role is clear, the kids' role is clear, and as long as we're not crossing that double yellow line, kids will grow up to eat like their parents. They do. So that like one moment of grabbing candy, like, maybe like, a few times as an adult, that'll be like something really fun, but that's not something you do regularly as a family. So that's not going to be something that he thinks of as like regular eating, right? And that will happen regardless of how much we say to them, how much we talk at them, how much we, for all, I don't know what a better word is, but like shame accidentally behaviors that are quite fun for kids and interesting, Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in response to this particular question we got, of course, there's a lot of work, because a lot of it sounds like is unpacking, as parents, our lived experience. So that's, a lifetime of work, I'm sure, not to be tackled in 25 minutes.
Nope.
But, if I had to sort of say back to you some of the key things that I've heard right now, it's, there's an element of trust. There's an element of talk less, model more. Remove the morality and judgment from food choices and the pressure.
And anytime the adult has like, again, this is in the research, when the adult has an ulterior motive, like there is a really big difference, from we put food on the table for dinner. And so there's like salad, and there's chicken, and there's bread, and there's, some broccoli. There's a really big difference between putting it on the table and being like, everyone can just choose what's right for them tonight, and like, pushing things towards kids and like, that's enough. And no. And like, no. And even like like you said, like the body tightening and the, and kids perceive pressure.
Are
like,
you watching me at the dinner table?
With Ellen Saturn, with our training, we actually filmed family dinners. Like, so that was part of like
oh my gosh,
the intake. It's my favorite. I love it so much because there's so many beautiful things that happen at people's but that's like part of the intake with kids, is often getting like a video to see where the pressure is coming from, because it's coming, and so,
yes.
And when children perceive pressure, just like the rates of disordered eating and eating disorder go through the roof, like there's all kinds of challenges. Kids don't end up in their best bodies, their right biological bodies. They tend to end up in larger bodies than they should have. Like all of this, people think, well, I'm just trying to help my kid maintain their proper body or their proper weight or their proper whatever. But it's like kids end up going in the other direction, because the moment they are free of the pressure, the pendulum swings, right? It's always for me in this work about how do we just like diffuse the pendulum so that we can start making better objective choices. So I would say, eating together as often as possible. And that's like, really hard for a lot of us because we have a lot of things going on. Eating together, providing lots of variety and options within our means for our kids in whatever way feels right to our family and the foods that we enjoy and we love. And like putting foods on the table that challenge kids as well as foods that are safe always. So not like putting only foods on the table that are really challenging for kids, but putting both and then allowing them to make choices without pressure. And then as they get into teens, we can start to talk a bit more, right? Because we are prepping them to go out. But I just think if I was going to offer something today, I would say that our wellness and diet culture, again, is hyper fixated on the biological aspect of health, micronutrients, macronutrients. And we forget that health and feeding is biopsychosocial. So psychological meaning mental, emotional. Food does comfort, food does soothe, food does celebrate, and it's also social. So it connects us to other human beings and to our culture and to the people that we love and to memory and nostalgia and like love, So how can we reframe if we've got these like, if we're noticing our kids getting rigid, how can we remind them that like health is so much bigger than just micronutrients and macronutrients. Health is so much bigger than a singular plate or meal, and that we really need to be nourished in all these ways in order to be well. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we could keep going, and there's so much more to tease out here, but I think that's probably a great place to stop in terms of supporting our community's question. And so I think we will probably ask you the same question that we ask all of our guests on this show, because in addition to sort of digging into your particular expertise, we also kind of want to learn more about some actionable, some approaches that you take in your own life, either, again, if you're comfortable sharing with your own kids or maybe with the families that you work with. So the question that we ask all of our guests at the end of our episodes is around sharing an action that you do in your own life, as I said, with your own kids, or again, something that you encourage families to do if you're working with them in a professional context to really further or foster connection. And again, for us, this connection piece, it's very ephemeral. It's hard to like really have all the time. It's fleeting, especially as they get older. But it's something I think that we are, again, chasing sounds like striving, but it's something that it's work. It's work, and it's an intention, and it's something that has to be worked at. So would love your perspective on an action that you do to foster that.
Well, it's like such a funny question. I'm just realizing. So my youngest daughter broke her ankle, which we were talking about before we sort of hit record. And so it's been kind of a funny few weeks for us, like a lot more, because I would say one of the biggest things that we do for connection is we eat together. I think that that's a really huge thing that we do. We come together at the dinner table, not every night of the week, because that's, dreams, but as often as we can. But it's been more like watching TV and eating in front of the TV. And, I was driving my older daughter home from dance the other night, and I said, what could we do? Like, what do we do to connect when we're not watching TV? Like, how can we get away from the TV? And she was like, where is this coming from, Mom? And I was like, well, I'm just like, I just feel like we've been in front of the TV so much lately. And she was like, listen, don't put this on me. I am really comfortable with the amount of TV I watch. And so we were like sort of laughing about it. But I realized that actually one of the things that we do is we tend to get out for a walk after dinner. We tend to bike ride. At this time of year, we would start playing tennis, just short, not long, really short, but we can't do any of it right now. Right. So I was kind of like reevaluating, what do we do to connect with each other? Because it feels like it's all gone. But I think that that's because primarily it has been active that we do to connect. So right now we're just, we watching TV and eating together.
It's beautiful. I mean, I think that the act of just being physically in proximity to your children and just like enjoying silence or like a shared entertaining experience is connection. I mean, I think that's
Yeah,
great.
I do too. I do too. We're,
I agree.
yeah. And she just prompted me. It was funny because she prompted me to like stop being so rigid in my own thinking about it. 'Cause I was like, this is wrong. We shouldn't be doing this. But she's
Yeah,
like,
I
"Oh,
love
it's
that.
cool. It's cool.
She's like, where's this coming from?
Yeah. What's going on with you?
So the big lesson also today is we just have to like not be rigid anywhere. Just like
Yeah.
just go with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And like,
Yeah.
and then I think like the other thing that I've really realized in this work that is like health is cycles and ebbs and flows. And there's like,
Yes.
I think of like the biopsychosocial as like a Venn diagram.
Yeah.
And it's never in perfect balance. There's always, so right now it's, you know, yes, of course we're taking care of healing up her foot, but there's also this like mental emotional thing that's happening in our family because we're in a stuck place, or, you know, and then we'll get back to the biological, we'll get back to movement, we'll get back to all that stuff in the summer when things shift and change again for us. And it's okay.
Yeah.
We don't always have to be hyper focused on physical bodies and fuel. And, you know, there's just like more to life and health than that. Yeah.
Love it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jill, thank you for helping us to zoom out, to see the big picture, to not be just so stuck in the close up of everything. You are a gift to the Food Joy, Body Joy community. Where can people find you, learn more about your work, and connect?
So on Instagram at Food Freedom Body Love, and my website is the same, foodfreedombodylove.com.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks for tuning in to Parenting Teens. We hope you found today's episode informative and helpful. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you want to dive deep into teen-related resources, visit our website at drinkramp.com. Do you have a teen-related question? Drop it on SpeakPipe at speakpipe.com/parenting teens. As always, we're here to support you on your parenting journey. Until next time.